This week, cyber insurance, the MSSP's biggest salesman, and standardizing MSP tools and techniques across your entire customer base. That and the latest news and trends in the managed security space coming up right now on Cyber for Hire.
Building bridges between managed security providers and their clients, it's the podcast where MSPs, vCISOs, and end users take a united stand against cybercrime. This is Cyber for Hire.
Cyber for Hire, the managed security podcast, would like to thank the following initial launch sponsors for supporting our program: Aptega, AT&T Cybersecurity, Cisco, NetSurian, and Stellar Cyber. Be sure to keep watching future episodes for more details on these sponsoring organizations. In the meantime, to learn more about our sponsors, you can visit us at msspalert.com/sponsors for additional information. And of course, be sure to get your fill of timely news and analysis from our partnering digital brands, SC Media, MSSP Alert, and Channel E2E. All right, welcome to episode number 2 of Cyber for Hire. How's everybody doing today? I'm Bradley Barth with SC Media in New York, and joining me on the other side of the Continental Divide is my co-host and partner in cybercrime, Ryan Morris, Principal Consultant with Morris Management Partners. Ryan, it's episode 2. We haven't been canceled yet.
The word for today's episode is longevity. We're here for the long run, folks. We're just getting started, but we got so many things to talk about. We don't know if we will ever be done.
Very true, very true. Now, before we really get into the heart of our cybersecurity discussion today, I just have to kind of tell you, Ryan, that I'm feeling a little bit weirded out today because, you see, here's the deal. When you're dealing with cybersecurity, there's always this concern already that there's going to be some kind of an attack on a computer system one day that might cause someone some physical harm, like, maybe you get some kind of a connected car to crash or something along those lines. But now we actually have someone who seems to be cutting out the middleman here. What do I need an evil hacker for when I can make my own technology deadly all by myself? Because you might have seen, Ryan, that Palmer Luckey, the founder of the virtual reality company Oculus, has created a virtual reality headset that will quite literally set off a series of explosive charges and basically blow your head off and kill the user if your avatar dies in the game. It's a literal game over, man situation. I mean, God forbid you're playing the game Cuphead, and if you have, you'll know why that's funny. So, I mean, Ryan, I don't know. Like, if you owned one of these headsets and your life is on the line, what game are you playing? What game is going to give you the best chance of survival?
See, this runs directly against my cyber gaming skills because I am notorious for being the regenerate whenever things get difficult guy. When you find yourself in a sticky situation and you just don't know how to get out, you just die and regenerate. That's the move, right? If this was brought into my world and I had to do it, I have to say, I think I'd go old school on this one. I'd go Red Dead Redemption because the open world design means that if things start to get a little bit sticky, I can just go wander around in the desert in the sagebrush for days on end so that I can keep myself alive while I'm trying to figure out how to get that thing off of my head.
See, but I like that attitude, Ryan, about just sort of like, you die and then you start over and you try again, right? Like that's the whole, it's the anti-rage quitting philosophy. You're not just going to throw the controller away and into the TV. You're gonna try again. The problem in this case is you can't try again. You're gonna be dead. My old school answer on this would be Tetris. I used to be really, really good at Tetris. I could get to like the top level, the top speed. I mean, granted, I know in that game it never ends. I'm saying if I could reach a certain point and clear a certain level, and that's what it would take to win the game, I'd probably pick that one. But I don't know. The guy says it's basically just a work of art right now. It's more of a novelty than anything. maybe in the future, if they want to actually try something like this, maybe there's some kind of VR system that just simulates a little mild pain or a shock or something like that. I don't know. But considering how many times I've played things like Assassin's Creed and been shot, stabbed, flung off cliffs, maybe it's just something, we don't need altogether.
Yeah, see, we don't need this in the real world because every teenager and teenager that has ever been in my sphere of influence knows that I am not a reliable teammate in a first-person shooter. That is not what I do. And when things get tough, I'm not there to back up other people. I'm going to peace out, come back to where it's easy, and then I'm just going to see how long I can last because I just am not that good.
Understood. Well, Ryan, maybe why don't you tell our audience if they would like to share with us what video game they would choose their life on the line, how do they let us know?
See, we know this is a topic of deep and philosophical conversation among our target audience. So please do reach out and share with us these ideas that you guys have and your reaction to the Oculus with the explosives. You can reach us at our email address, cyberforhire@cyberriskalliance.com, or on the show page, which you can get on our website, and we'll give you more information on how to get to that, as well as all the links to news items, key stories, and background information for the topics that we will be discussing today. So please share. We would love to share some of your very interesting perspectives on a future episode.
All right, awesome. Well, for now, we're going to hit the pause button on this particular discussion. And with that, it's time for our featured MSP industry topic of the day, presenting our big idea in business. It's becoming increasingly difficult to qualify for cyber insurance. Insurance providers are wary of multimillion-dollar payouts resulting from costly ransomware attacks. And so the onus is on companies to prove that they can meet certain minimum cyber hygiene standards. One of the potential paths to reach this objective is by contracting a managed security provider who can ensure that you meet coverage criteria. But just how big of a difference does this strategy make? Enough for MSSPs to make insurance a key selling point? Conversely, do cyber insurance companies judge MSSPs' coverage worthiness based on the clients they keep? And what are some examples of exclusionary language that cyber insurance policyholders in an MSP relationship need to watch out for? These are just some of the questions we'll be asking today's featured guest, Joseph Brunsman, founder and president of Brunsman Advisory Group, an insurance brokerage focusing on professional liability, tech E&O, employment practices, and cyber insurance coverages. Joe uses his technical background to specialize in solving complex insurance problems for businesses across the country. You can find him on Reddit as Joe_cyber and on his YouTube channel, Joseph Brunsman. He's the co-author of 3 best-selling books on insurance, including Open Before Crisis, Cyber Insurance for CPA Firms. His next book on tech E&O insurance is slated to be published in late 2022. Last year alone, he worked on approximately 2 breaches per week. So he's the perfect guest for this segment. Joe, thanks for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I would just add real quick that the game I would not play was when I was a kid. What was it called? Super Ghouls and Goblins? Like,
I don't know if I know that one.
Oh,
it was really hard.
The reason you don't know it is because it's always ranked like one of the top 5 hardest Super Nintendo games. And as a kid, man, it just ruined my life. I'm like, how is this so hard? And I didn't find out till later that after a month of dying on level 1, so I didn't find out until really just a couple of weeks ago that it really was that hard of a game. Like it was, so bad, so hard.
Yeah, that's funny.
It's good that it wasn't just you, right? Because I know people who played that game way back when, but that was my thing, right? I play sports video games because I know that I probably can win. There's at least a 50-50 shot that I can win, right? Mm-hmm. All of these other games, they were designed to engage you, to hook you, keep you here forever. And the way to do that is make it very difficult. So.
Yeah, like that old Wayne's World joke, right? Where the arcade owner is like, oh yeah, and these kids that keep pumping quarters in, and they're looking for like the little cube or something, but there is no cube, so they just like keep dying and throwing quarters in. That's what I felt like as a kid. It's
a business model, not just a video game.
I still think my most traumatic video game memory was the original Nintendo Entertainment System and getting almost through all the way to the end of Zelda. And then for some reason, it nothing saved and I lost the entire game progress back to the
Ooh.
beginning, and I was just like, I can't possibly go through all of this again. But all right, but let's get down to business. So cyber insurance and MSSPs, Joe. As we were kind of getting at before, it is becoming increasingly difficult to qualify for coverage, and part of that is the wariness around these ransomware attacks and other cyber attacks are happening a lot. So you need to clear a certain bar. So just how big of a difference can it be for a company looking to clear that bar and get insured to contract with an MSSP for them to make sure that you're meeting that proper criteria?
So I would answer it in a slightly different question. I would say it's inevitable for 95% of businesses. The requirements, we're just seeing more and more every year. The policies are getting more complex. The exclusions are getting more complex. So an example would be there's one policy out there for SMBs, very popular carrier, where they have effectively an exclusion that if there is a critical vulnerability score of 8 or greater anywhere in your system, if that leads to a breach and you didn't implement the patch within 14 days after it got released, there's no coverage for that. And so you just imagine you're an SMB out there, your local IT guy. I used to be an IT guy, right? So maybe it's your local IT guy, your in-house person. They're so busy with making sure Zoom works and making sure the conference center is set up and, fixing, passwords, resetting passwords, all that kind of stuff. Keeping track of critical vulnerabilities, it's just too much. And we're seeing the burnout in the industry. There's just too much going on. There's too much coming from the cyber world. There's too much coming from the criminal world. So effectively, it's just inevitable. It's just a matter of when. And I would argue that the later that businesses choose to go down that path, the bigger the expenditure is going to be, kind of just a one-time outlay to get up to minimum requirements, the more painful it's going to be. And probably what's going to happen is that business is going to get hit. Now they have to justify what they've done to avoid a similar event moving forward. And they're going to sit there and they're going to go, we don't have 24/7 monitoring. We don't have a SOC. We don't know how to implement EDR. We have, all of these things that maybe are now requirements or things that you're going to have to do in the next couple months or year at least. They won't even know how to tackle that problem. And it's just going to be MSP, MSSP. It's inevitable.
See, so Joe, my question for you is, as an industry, we've been trying to persuade end users to adopt and practice cybersecurity hygiene for years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we tend to resort to the topic of fear and damage and the sky is falling, right? We try to paint these, if you get hit by ransomware, X percentage of you will never recover and you'll go out of business and the sky is falling. And that does not motivate the decision maker to do the things that we're doing, because they just don't believe the business case, right? Mm-hmm. As you were looking at it from a cyber perspective, are we getting to a point of credibility where either the cost of the breach or at least the increase in the monthly premiums on your insurance, is that enough to get a decision maker to finally attach a financial consequence to the failure to do cybersecurity?
Oh, it's easier than that. So in many regards, it's thou shalt not have cyber insurance if you don't meet these minimum requirements. And so, yeah, I'm the insurance guy. A lot of my job ends up being like I'm a free sales guy for MSPs and MSSPs, because I'm the one that has to break the bad news. That's like, hey, surprise, if you don't have a 3-to-1 backup strategy, if you don't have immutable backups, EDR on 95% endpoints, et cetera, that's the new requirement from your insurance company. And so you got 30 days and, it's a take it or leave it. The insurance companies, they're losing so much money that if you're not going to do it, there's 100 companies behind you the underwriter will take care of. So,
well, and these changes have come on quite rapidly, right? Mm-hmm. From an insurance perspective. Just a few years ago, these were not the bars that we had to exclude. If you said, based on where some of the sample criteria that you just listed for us, if you compared that to, say, 2019, pre-pandemic, what were the correlates? How much has this accelerated? Just to give people kind of a scope of the change that we're dealing with. 95% of endpoints having a 3-2-1 backup. What were the requirements like just as recently as 2019?
Oh, if you had a pulse, and I mean, you were good. And that's where,
Nice.
man, I tell you what, so many people just told me, I started working on this when I left the Navy. And I was like, hey, because of my background, I got a degree in robotics. I used to be in IT, ended up with a master's in cyber law. I was like, this just really interests me. And everybody was like, dude, there's no money in this. You're wasting your time, right? There's no requirements. The regulators don't care. And I was like, yeah, but I just really like it. I think it's super cool. So yeah, I was shouting from the rooftop 7-8 years ago. I was like, this is insane. You got to start mandating these controls. Like, eventually this thing is going to collapse and they're going to have to get a hold of this problem. And it turns out I was right. The one time I was right.
So Joe, if contracting an MSSP is a necessary must-have, if it is inevitable for organizations, as you're saying, then are MSSPs doing a good enough job right now leveraging cyber insurance as a key selling point or selling tool? Hey, you need us because you need to, again, meet the following A, B, C, D, E criteria to qualify for that cyber insurance that obviously means this much to you.
I don't think the industry, well, there's maybe two parts to this question. So the first thing, I think they're just seeing, my discussion with firms in the industry. They're like, yeah, this is great. Cyber insurance companies are saying like, thou shalt do X, Y, Z. And so people just come to me and they have to do this. And so it makes the sales team, they have a kind of an invisible sales partner out there. The difficult part is each insurance company is going to have their own kind of twist, and it's going to depend upon the industry of the client, the size of the client, the controls they already have, et cetera, et cetera. But there are things that, I think that community, the MSP community, the MSSP community, could really be leveraging that, and they should in a responsible sense. So, for example, we're seeing legacy hardware software exclusions as just an easy example, right? And it's, hey, you may not know about this until 7 days before you're supposed to renew or 14 days before you're supposed to renew, right? And you're not just going to go buy a new server. Not right now. I was just talking with an MSP at a conference I was giving a talk at, and he was like, yeah, we had to go buy a switch, and there's a 285-day wait period. So it's, I think that not only will it help the sales of the MS and the MSSP community, but also it's really, I think, a imperative that they go out and they start educating clients and saying, hey, this is what we're seeing coming down the pipe. They can literally just YouTube my name and they'll see all the information out there. This is what's coming. Maybe at the QBR, we need to start planning, hey, maybe something's end of life in a year. Maybe you have this legacy software, or you don't have EDR, or you don't have MFA or SSO, whatever twist you want to put on it. This is coming. We want to get you ready now, because if you have to come to us a week before, 2 weeks before, we may just not be able to get it done in time. And then you're going to be sitting there with no cyber insurance. And then that leads to a cascade of potential failures and bad issues and losing retroactive coverage and all types of things. So I think it's good for the community to do that. And I also think it's their responsibility, because, I'm putting this stuff out there, but I think I'm the only guy talking about this as far as I can see. And I'm just a dude, right? So just a guy on the internet.
It always starts with one Pied Piper who can lead us all to the promised land, right? So I see this, Joe, as kind of the natural evolution or the maturing process of any industry. The day that it's gone from, kind of the figure it out as we go and build a business in your garage to when it becomes a legitimate profession. The transition gateway tends to be that an insurance company has the ability to build an actuarial table to financialize the risk associated with that business, because all the variables are known. Based on what you're talking about and the rate of acceleration that's going on in the expectations, do the insurers feel like we're there now. Like if you met this checklist of requirements, we're cool, we'll pay out, everybody's going to be on the same page? Or do you expect that this is going to continue to accelerate over the next couple of years?
It's only going to get worse. So, whether I would love to be able to sit here and tell you that the insurance companies know what they're doing, but their loss ratios say otherwise. The preponderance of the top 25 cyber insurance companies, their loss ratios are just point blank not profitable. They're just not making money. They're losing money. It's just a matter of how much money they are losing. And so it's difficult to say like, hey, if you just meet these requirements, because it depends, right? So we're seeing insurance companies, they're saying, hey, maybe we don't have the actuarial data to say this works, this doesn't. But what we do know with a large sample size is if you're in this industry, we just won't insure you anymore because we're taking huge losses there and we don't know what works. Or if you're in this industry and you're above or below this revenue band, you're toast. Go find somebody else. And so the danger to the end client in all of this is, the MSP can go and say, hey, this is what we're seeing. And the client goes, well, our insurance company hasn't mandated that yet, so we're not going to do anything. Well, the trick is you might not know until 60 days before renewal. You get a letter and your insurance company goes, hey, man, kick rocks. We're not going to deal with you anymore. You're thrust back into the open market, and now it's all hands on deck, this huge, very expensive push, right? Like a massive outlay in whatever quarter that you didn't expect. And it's like, you don't want to play that game. You're going to increase your cybersecurity budget the easy way or the hard way, right? You're either going to do it last second or after a cyber event or after regulators start coming down on you, and we're seeing that more and more. Or you're going to do it the easy way where you have a plan of implementation and you're working with your MSP and your MSSP and maybe internal IT and you got the CFO in there. It's inevitable. Too much money is being lost. And frankly, companies that aren't taking security seriously, even my clients, right? I'm telling them, I'm like, yo, if you don't do this, you're not going to be my client next year. You're so far behind. I've got so many people knocking on my door. Either do it or I'm just going to resign and you'll have to do it eventually anyways, but I don't have time to deal with it. Not last second.
Joe, we know that businesses, of course, are seeking cyber insurance coverage. On the MSSP side, they may be seeking insurance themselves. In doing so, to what extent do they get dinged in some kind of a negative fashion for taking on clients that maybe have a little bit of a sketchy history in terms of they've been prominently attacked before, they perhaps have a reputation for not following some of the best cybersecurity or privacy standards. Is it important on the MSSP side to consider who we accept and embrace into our client base? And if you are going to accept them, then, how important is it for them to mandate that you have to follow that certain criteria or standards if you want to continue this relationship with us?
Yeah, so what I see moving forward is one, MSPs and MSSPs are just like the redheaded stepchild of the insurance industry. So I picked a hell of a branch of insurance to get known in. It's getting really, really hard. So one, I would say one of the key risk management, risk transference mechanisms I recommend on my YouTube channel video called Get Smart is contractually requiring your clients to carry cyber insurance. Because you as an MSP or MSSP, your tech E&O policy should not be a piggy bank for every time an end user does something boneheaded. Likewise, I would say, I get when you first start your business, you kind of got to take all comers. But I can't just go to an accounting firm and tell them, I know my tax rate is X. Yeah, that's just too high. I'm not going to pay that. I can't go to an architect and engineering firm and say, I know I want a bridge. You put the safety load as 20%. That's just too expensive. let's make it 5%, right? They're going to laugh you out the door. They're immediately going to say, get lost, buddy. We don't have time for you, right? The risk to us is too high. It's against our professional standards, against a whole bunch of ethics laws. We're going to get burned in court. We're not going to do that. So what I see moving forward is companies increasingly saying, you either meet the minimum requirements, right? And then we talk about going up from there based on your circumstances, or we just, this relationship will not happen, right? Like it's just a non-starter. So I think the sooner the community just puts their foot down, there's always going to be somebody that will do it for less, that will ignore, right, that those minimum requirements. Let them get sued into oblivion and become uninsurable and shut their doors down. But moving forward, it's you got to have that baseline of this is the bare minimum. And if you don't do this, you're just not our client, right? And
See, I'm sorry, Joe. I was just going to say, I think this I feel like is a professional level higher than maybe what we have thought of ourselves as the technology industry, right? The legal industry, the professional accounting industry, the architect and design, the engineering and manufacturing industries. There are standards, there are certifications, there are often exams and licensures that have to be associated with those professions. In technology, we've always said we want none of that. We just want to be able to hang out a shingle, say, this is Ryan's MSP, and off we go. Because that gives us access, A, to the easiest startup cost, and then B, to the broadest possible set of customers. And what you're pointing to is not every customer is available and not every customer is even accessible, right? So I think that puts a ton of pressure on the business development side for MSPs. Most MSPs, not the best at marketing and selling to begin with. And then if we take the candidate pool and we radically shrink it because only people who are responsible citizens on the insurance side can qualify to get into your pipeline, that means we have to get even sharper on it. I would be curious, from your real world experience as you're making these arguments with customers, who's the decision maker that actually says yes, right? Is this an argument we can win with the IT department where the CISO says, see it, got it, I'm going to go and advocate for this up the chain? Do we approach this at the CFO level? Is this a strategy question with other C-suite executives? Who do you see actually buying this concept of risk management and cyber insurance?
so it depends on it depends on a number of factors, but I would argue that cybersecurity impacts every level of an organization, right? So we ideally, right, and it's easy for me to say this sitting here, but I'll just say, people come to me and they're like, hey, I don't want to spend that much on insurance. I want to spend this much on insurance. And I know that level of insurance is inadequate. They're just not my client, frankly. So I think that it behooves the MSP or the MSP to talk to all of the decision makers, right? And really, I think it's more of an education process, right? Where the MSP could sit down and go, okay, let's just run some brief calculations. Let's go online. Let's look at a data breach calculator. Let's just start running through, right? What's your downtime going to be? According to this third party, you can go through multiple calculators. What's the event going to cost you? What's the probability that regulators start come after you, right? Like, let's start looking at that. Have you engaged with legal counsel to determine what your statutory requirements could be, right? And often what I see, even from the cyber insurance side, is just crickets, right? And then I start educating and saying, okay, let me learn about your business. Tell me what you're worried about. And then adding those together and saying, okay, here's what you're not worried about, but I think you should be. Let's talk about that. And I think once they get educated and comfortable with discussing, because often I see the C-suite executives, like, they don't want to look dumb, right? So you have to be able to sit there and go, okay, I'm going to look dumb. I'm just going to ask you a bunch of potentially dumb questions about your business because it's going to help me. In return, right, feel free to ask any question you want. It will not leave this room, right? I want to keep you safe. Let's figure out how to do that. So I'll say, at least from my side, I've been very successful doing that, but I understand that it's not as simple, where, most tech people, they're in tech, not Broadway, right? So I understand some of that hesitancy there, but it's something that you either do it now or you're going to do it later. And I will just say from the MSP and the MSSP side, if you get hit with a claim because you did not recommend higher security or you didn't contractually require cyber insurance, whatever that situation is, good luck getting a policy next year. It's hard enough this year. It is really hard. Good luck getting it next year. You're potentially uninsurable. We're also seeing, as one kind of like last little interesting note, I just saw this today. So I pulled this up because I thought it'd be interesting. We're now seeing, it's easy for the CEO to sit there and be like, too much money. I don't want to do this. The FTC just put out a consent order. This is a 20-year consent order with just a laundry list of data security requirements, not just against the company, it's also following the CEO, which means effectively that dude is pretty much unhireable for the next 20 years because any business he goes to where he's an executive or a CEO, et cetera, that consent order is going to follow that guy. So now we're talking about, the true livelihood of the CIO, the CFO, the CEO, the CTO, et cetera. That's going to be my next video that's coming out because that's a shot across the bow, and that's going to change a lot of minds when they know about this.
See that I completely agree with you. The concept of risk and the cost of a cyber breach, we've been trying to make that tangible for years and years. If you can put it into financial terms for the organization, that's interesting. If you can put it into a very specific calculation for an individual business within a vertical, that gets a little bit more compelling. But you put it on that human and his job requirements and his career path, I think people might actually wake up and start to pay attention to this stuff. So this is, again, it's a massive topic and tons of complexity. So, Joe, I'm glad you have a lot of online resources that we can point people to. And for everybody listening in, we will be actually sharing some links to Joe's YouTube channel, the website, and other resources so that you guys can actually go in there and start to learn. We're never going to solve it in a half an hour, right? But this hopefully opens a lot of minds and gets people to start thinking differently, not just about the technical requirements of cybersecurity, but what the business and financial requirements are, because that's a whole new conversation. So that's excellent information, Joe. Before we let you go, we like to do a thing here on our program where we get to know the folks in the industry. The one thing we always say is, nobody does cybersecurity or adjacent professions on accident. You choose to do this for a reason. And generally speaking, birds of a feather, hey, we tend to show up here and we have some things in common. Most notably, we're all geeks about something, right? In your world, whether it's technology or individual, your profession, your hobbies, what are you a geek about, Joe?
Oh, man, I nerd out on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It is like
Nice.
It is the best sport in the world, and there's a bunch of tech people that do it. So you asked me to bring a prop. These are these are the two belts that I found. I don't know where my other belt is.
Oh, cool.
But the single best sport in the entire world. It is infinitely complex. It is super easy to start. It is horrifically boring to watch, but it is so it's like the worst spectator sport in the world, but the best participant sport in the world. And so I think I'll just say, like, at least for me, the complexity is appealing to me. So it's really a sport for nerds. Meatheads generally don't last that long because it takes too much time to get good. It's too complex. A little bit of jiu-jitsu goes a real long way in a street fight. A lot of jiu-jitsu will change your life. And so it's super fascinating. The people are awesome. It's kind of like the rising tide lifts all boats. And I would imagine most people watching this are old enough to remember Bruce Lee, right? So like this idea that when we were kids that the smaller, weaker guy could defeat the bigger, stronger opponent if he just knew the right moves. And, martial arts was this golden opportunity to increase self-discipline and expose all your flaws so that you could work on them and it'd make you a better person in the long run. I don't think any traditional martial art really delivered on that promise, but jiu-jitsu does. And so
Is that what makes it philosophically a little bit different? Because I was going to ask you, what differentiates Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu from some of the other martial arts? And, is there some kind of a running philosophy on it or a certain type of technique which distinguishes it? So what would that be?
So probably the major difference is we do grappling as opposed to striking. So we have, striking, if you're going to win a fight, you're knocking that guy unconscious. Whereas grappling, we have the full spectrum of use of force. So I can get to a position where I can hurt somebody else, but they can't hurt me. Maybe I just hold them there. If I need to, I can choke the guy unconscious and leave him nicely on the ground. All the way up to if I got to shred that guy's knee for life or completely shred his elbow and turn it the other way around, like you can do that. But it's like the only sport in the world where, half a second more and you would have been unconscious on the ground. You tap the guy, he lets go, and you're like, dude, that was awesome. How did you do that? What was that move? Right? So it's like this super deadly sport full of awesome people that are way smarter than I am. A lot of IT folks get into it. I think because of the complexity and how intellectual the sport really is.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it's super cool. And I just in terms of like stress relief, because I know burnout's a big problem.
Oh God, yeah.
When you got some 250-pound dude sitting on your chest trying to choke you, like the last thing you're worried about is like family problems or what's going on at work or what your boss thinks or any of that. So it's really more of a savage moving meditation, and it's so cool to see people that are so good at something that they can just kind of effortlessly flow around, and I'm sitting there going full force, full power, and there's just nothing I can do. So to put it in perspective, Fernanda Mazzelli, who's an awesome lady, she's like, I think a 3-time black belt world champion. She grabbed my gi and I was like, oh no, like this. And she just, she took me for a ride. There was just nothing I could do. Nothing I could do.
Yeah.
So I'd say,
I think you've hit it though, right? For the nerds among us, for those of us in this world, if it's too accessible, if it's too easy, it's not going to keep our interest for very long. But it's the complexity plus that deeper learning. That's exactly what brings the techie brain out in all of us. So not only are we taking you along for the ride on cyber insurance protection, but I think we might actually bring you along for other reasons as well. So Joe's a very good guy to know.
Absolutely. I guess in summation, what we've learned here is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, meatheads need not apply. So there you go. Thanks, Joseph. I appreciate it. Fascinating. Next time I see you in person, you're going to have to do a demonstration for me. Not on me, but for me.
Careful what you ask for.
That's right, Ryan. Thanks again to Joseph Brunsman for joining us today. But that's not the end of our show. Don't go anywhere. We're only halfway done. Please return for the second half of our episode featuring our cybersecurity strategy topic of the week, our InfoSec news rundown, and our Dear Cyber for Hire advice column segment. See you in a moment on the other side.